Welcome back. So we had a slight disruption of the service, which happens not only to Facebook. So the next part of the speech was basically about what we are doing on 5G in Luxembourg. And I briefly started to explain that we filed 2 use cases actually for the call for projects of the SMC about 1.5 years ago, I don't know exactly. And in the meantime, even if COVID disrupted a little bit, we have a lot of outcome of both cases. The first case is about automotive and sport. And so the idea is simply that we have an IoT device which is specifically on very performant, very high-speed objects, able to track them accurately to 10 centimeters, and also consider things like lean angle or other sensors which are then actually linked to that IoT box. And then we're using currently the 4G network to actually bridge the gap to a platform that we developed on AWS. And the motivation for that is like very generic use cases. We filed some use cases here in Luxembourg, but what is more interesting is that we already have an interesting outcome of it. The team here in Luxembourg develops a solution in the meantime in a 5 years contract on IoT for the TT races on the Isle of Man. The Luxembourgish government, the government of the Isle of Man thought that Luxembourg is the place where digitalization is very far in the meantime, and they asked us to organize a state visit. So the Minister of Economy of the Isle of Man came over. We hosted the whole thing together with Flux Innovation and also visited, for instance, the location of SAS, the chateau of SAS. And so that triggered, like I said, a project where we are doing the entire race management and race timing. So we can really, these bikes are actually going very fast, and very fast means up to 200 miles per hour over a track of more than 60 kilometers. And we can track them on 10 centimeters accurately, and also make predictions, for instance, on safety or something like this. And so the goal was really of the government, which is running the races, that they are have the ambition to make the most dangerous sports event in the world as safe as possible, even if it sounds a bit silly. Now, obviously, the next step is that we are currently with them into discussion in rolling out a private 5G network around that track of 60 kilometers, because initially it was like all the thoughts, could we use Wi-Fi or something like that, but it was no way that this would be a reliable solution. So we went for the telco network, and currently in the IoT box, we are actually collecting all that data, that information, and then we do a fast reconnect with the provider of the network over there to make sure whatever that all the data is gathered and collected into the platform that we built on AWS. Don't waste more time on it, but there was a lot that should be presented by Katja, but first of all, I don't think we have the time, and second, she's not here, so I would not be the right person to show the case. Good. Performance analysis compared to health, there are lots of use cases linked to it. The second case that we filed was about digital health platform. So basically, there are 2 use cases for that, and we do this to go with the hospital Robert Schumann. Whoever was in the last session probably got a little bit more insight into this one. And there are 2 different use cases. The first is about remote patient monitoring. So for instance, if a patient is back from a surgery or something like that, especially in the heart side of the cardiovascular system, we will be able then to say, okay, he's at home, and we can provide him monitoring features at home so that he doesn't have to come to the hospital, first of all, and second of all, that he's constantly measured and monitored. And we are not only using medical devices, we have a couple of medical devices which are certified and also connected to the platform, but we're also using consumerization devices. So if the patient agrees, we can leverage information coming from, for instance, an Apple Watch, and then, let's say, contribute that information towards the current state of his health process. So that's one of the things. Obviously, all that information gets collected via the 5G network and is then brought into a data lake on the hospital, and we can do meaningful research and outcome of that information, and we can also connect research on it. Now, I don't go into the detail because it would be much too complicated. The second use case that we have filed in this call for project is about stroke. So a patient who has a stroke actually has the issue that the treatment has to start as early as possible. So if you drive him across the country and bring him to the hospital, and you can easily figure out how much of his brain cells are dying while he's on that road before the treatment starts or whatever, we will have a real benefit of starting the treatment earlier. And there we are talking with CGDs on the connected ambulance and bringing the doctor in that sense to the patient to start the treatment earlier. All that is going via the 5G network. And we also using in the ambulance, working on the front end side, as you can see with Apple, we're using Apple devices, currently iPads, but there is a lot of talk about glasses that are coming up. They use the same health kit and they use the same AR kit to build actually the applications. So that's where we see clearly an innovative way of connecting those use cases via the 5G network. I think there was a video even presenting this case, and I maybe can run this one, if I can.
Stroke is the second leading cause of death in the world and particularly affects developed countries. Hospitals around the world are trying to make the time between symptom onset and treatment delivery as short as possible.
Heart infarction needs the same quickness of response. There is definitely an increase in this type of patients and an increase in the need to diagnose those patients, to find early when the patient is not well, and to get only hospitalization in people who are really needing those hospitalizations.
The main objective is to create an integrative digital platform, allowing the implementation of specific use cases and preparing the subsequent implementation of future use cases.
The envisioned open digital platform will connect apps, services, health-related IoT devices while exchanging all kinds of sensitive, relevant data and content in real time in a secure and reliable way.
So HGRS and NTT did team up together in what we call a call for projects on 5G, which is initiated by the Ministry of Media and Telecommunication, based on use cases, for instance, like stroke that has to be treated in a very early time frame. We are able to start the treatment before the patient arrives into the hospital.
What we will bring really together with this use case is, on the stroke unit, really bring the neurologist directly to the incident place. What will this mean? When the securist is near the patient, then the neurologist will make a direct connection to him. So he will see him virtually in place and can, with the urgencies, together take the right decision to the patient. So when the people has a question, when he has to do a checklist, when there is an alarm, everything will be then centralized from the hospital, from the IoT platform with the 5G connection.
The transition from hospital to home is a high-risk period in the continuity of healthcare, where adverse events are most likely to occur. One such adverse event is hospital readmissions and is associated with high morbidity and high costs. Heart failure is one of the most common conditions associated with hospital readmission, 30% at 1 month. Properly implemented, telemedicine, home monitoring and mobile empowerment apps have been shown to be effective in improving home care, patient outcomes and reducing hospital readmission rates.
We
We have launched a call for projects, and out of all the projects that came back to us, we could see that there are two very exciting projects about health and monitoring health of patients. We are very happy to see that 5G is getting used in those projects to really have a constant surveillance of patients. It allows indeed a much better monitoring of their health parameters, but there's also for the patients to feel much more relaxed and much more comfortable, especially if they are already back home and in a remote location. So there's a less time spent at hospital, a greater well-being felt by the citizens, and this is where you can see that new technologies can really be used for the benefit of the citizens.
You have to build a bridge between the place where you can do the first treatment and the platform in the hospital and the doctor. And this is via the 5G transport that we are achieving this. So that's the link between securely building up a connection towards the use case in the ambulance towards the platform back in the hospital.
We think that as a small country, we have the short distances, the good connections to really help citizens and businesses to really foster and develop a nice ecosystem where we can all move forward.
I'm very proud that HAS is helping our department to evolve. We need a whole community of people working together to find solutions and to make those solutions work.
We know that the future of medicine will be connected devices, will be artificial intelligence, will be Internet of Things, connecting all partners around the patient. In that sense, we really want to be one of the leaders in this future development.
It is this profoundly human element we shall never forget, while technology will be adding significant value to the way that healthcare is delivered, and while the patient's role evolves from passive, and one being treated, to jointly active, taking care of his health together with the doctors and nurses.
We started here something which will be huge, and I mean, it's just the start of a journey. So I think that's a use case that sums up where we are currently here in Luxembourg, and we can afterwards go into the discussions how we will achieve that, and specifically also how we come from a proof of concept state into something that goes afterwards in production, because there are lots of stakeholders in Luxembourg that have to be aligned on it, and of course we have to be part of all of them. Good, that's the use case part. We have tomorrow morning, I think, the CIO of Köln-Bonn Airport, who will come over and explain what we are doing at NTT to roll out a private 5G network over there. And with that, I hand first over to Anush for the technical part of it. Oh, okay, that was...
All right, so hello everyone, welcome, and I'm Anuj Wala. I'm a senior infrastructure consultant in NTT, though I recently joined NTT like 2 months back, but before that, I used to teach 5G. So not only from the business use cases perspective, but also from the technical perspective, not only from the access side of the story, but also the core side of the story, the transport side of the story, and the services side of the story. So my goal was to teach my participants how 5G changes the entire or transforms the entire network from the technology perspective, but also from the end-to-end perspective, not just one segment of the network. As you can see now, I'm going to plug in the technical side of what NTT is doing. Like we have a brilliant use cases coming up, but those are from the businesses side. What happens or what brings these use cases to actual implementation is going to be discussed in the coming slides. So in order to tell you the solution from what NTT is proposing, I would first discuss what are the pain points which are being observed right now. The use cases can be broadly segregated into 3 major buckets. You can see EMBB or enhanced mobile broadband. Broadband was and is really working well with LTE, but when introduction of AR, VR, and more data is being consumed by the infrastructure mobile broadband, that it becomes a problem. What you can do is, yes, you can add more links to the infrastructure, but you're not adding any kind of automation. You're not adding any kind of intelligence. You're not making the network proactive. So these are the basic drawbacks in the EMBB side. The URLLC, ultra reliable low latency communication use cases. This use case is very precarious because this is not just URLLC as a one use case. I see a segregation or further segregation of URLLC as ultra low latency communication and reliable communication, all right? So these are completely two different use cases. Some use cases might require ultra low latency, but they do not require reliable communication. And on the other side, you might need reliable communication, but ultra low latency could be compromised. So when we put this two different segregation into one bucket, the problem statement about how to reach it. Our network is not able to reach microseconds, or we are talking about nanoseconds when it comes to 6G. So right now we are still in the world of milliseconds, and the dream of less than 50 milliseconds is still a dream for a lot of people. So how to achieve that is a kind of a pain point in URLLC use case. And massive machine type of communication, the MMTC. IoT, as we know, more and more devices, more and more OT are kind of interacting with each other, less and less motivation to have humans connecting with machines, but it's more about machines communicating to machines. And how to achieve this in huge numbers when we talk about smart cities, smart phones, when you talk about IoT devices, there are thousands, if not millions of devices connected to each other. So how to address these issues are also some of the things which are holding the companies back, and it's quite complex to implement. It looks really good on the slide, but in order to implement it, it's really difficult to understand. So, and what are the basic outcomes which a company or an enterprise would like to achieve? Accelerate digital transformation. So digital transformation can be from multiple ways. The main part is to educate our own employees about the digital transformation. We talk about AI, ML, we keep on throwing these jargons, but what the CEO just decided that, yes, I have to implement cloud, I have to implement AI, I have to implement ML, machine language, but what it actually means, we have to take this learning curve. We have to explain to the employees that, okay, this is what when we meet AI ML, this is actually just making the network more intelligent. It's not something which is coming out from the movie or the sci-fi world, but it's actually just learning from what you are doing and then trying to predict an outcome before the actual breakage of the network happens. So it could be a cultural transformation as well. So there are different types of digital transformation. Seamless connectivity. So whether you are on the 100th floor or on down the cellars, you need to make sure that experiences are seamless. No matter what, if you are using Skype, Microsoft Teams, Cisco WebEx, whatever kind of applications you are using, you need to make sure that you don't have buffering speed or there is no much latency between this, the humans and the applications. Both of these, when they combine together, we actually improve employee experience and enhance productivity. Yes, YouTube is good, but when you are trying to access Salesforce, when you are trying to access SharePoint on the internet, and if it takes 2 minutes for it to just download one file or just to open the site, it absolutely reduces the productivity. We have been on Teams or Microsoft WebEx. It has happened so many times that we are just stuck where we don't have access. Half of the time, can you hear me? Oh, okay, no. Can you just wait for some time? These are the things which keep on happening frequently. So this actually kind of boils up the problems of what an employee can experience and actually brings down the productivity. After that, yes, who is in the control of the network? With the recent things which are happening around in the network or infrastructure world, the control or the autonomous part of the story or security part of the story is the biggest outcome from what a CIO-centric model is coming out. So I think security and control of the data and it makes sure that the mission-critical information does not go outside the network is one of the main outcome which an enterprise is planning to bring to the organization. So what are private networks? What do we as NTT bring on the table? So private network, if you ask me or if you ask NTT, we see it as 3 different lenses. The first lens is the enterprise or the CIO just goes to the communication service provider and asks, hey, can you build us a private network for us? Now, the communication service provider could be Verizon, it could be Sprint, T-Mobile, or Vodafone. It could be any communication service provider. And it goes and says, hey, can you build a private network for me? But what about control? But what about security? But what about performance? Security and performance, yes, could be achieved by that example, but you don't have the control of our own network. The second use case is you ask this service provider, hey, can you give me a slice of the network? Okay, so this is another buzzword which is being thrown around in the world, is the concept of network slicing. But network slicing, I have been teaching network slicing, and trust me, it's not an easy affair, to implement. It looks really good that we take actually some of the part of the network, but then you might not have control. What about security? What about roaming slicing? Slice looks good in the private sector, but if you're moving outside, what happens about that? What about performance? As long as you're not dedicating the resources for that particular service or hard slicing, it's really difficult to get industry class performance from that slicing architecture. The third, or the purest form, which we have adopted and we try to promote, is everything behind the firewall. All right, so it's a CIO-centric, enterprise-first model where we put all the hardware, we put all the control behind the firewall in the enterprise location. So we are not taking the data outside. The enterprises have a complete secured control over the network, and we only use the analytics part, or we only use the dashboard outside on a particular cloud. We are not taking away the control. We are putting all the hardware resources. We are even putting the mobile edge cloud inside or behind the firewall. We are just treating it like a LAN extension. All right, so it's just an example of a LAN extension. You have the complete control. It's completely secured because it's behind the firewall. So whatever comes out goes through the firewall, and just the analytics part is outside your center or your yeah. So this is what we try to promote, and we are bringing to the table the purest form, according to us, of private networks, where you have the complete control, your network is secured, and your performance is guaranteed. So let's talk about the NTT private 5G platform. So it's not only just one model which we are trying to bring. We are trying to bring both our private 5G and LTE experience to the table. What I mean by that we make sure that the control, the security, and performance are there when we try to bring in on the first day itself. We have zero-touch deployment method as well. We have secured method, and CIO-centric, enterprise-first private network is what we are bringing to the table. And by the way, the control, security, and performance, they go hand to hand, but they are quite modular. Some of the use cases might require performance to be the prime factor, so we can modularize according to the requirements, and it does not have to be that three of them, the factors have to work in unison. The next interesting part is we bring a spectrum on the table. What do I mean by that? That if there are some countries who do not have the provision of licensing the spectrum, or they don't know what to do about it, we can actually go ahead, buy the spectrum from the government, and we can put that on the table as well. This is a very interesting use case because in European countries, this is not a problem, but in Canada, in Africa, there are a lot of countries who do not have any provision of providing the spectrum for 5G or for private 5G. So what to do about that? So we can actually bring our expertise, and we can bring spectrum on the table as well. The global connectivity, I will pass the ball to my colleague Roman, but then NTT Global Operating Centers. We have been operating for so many years, 365, 24/7. We have expertise all global 180 countries and counting. So we bring that expertise in order to cater to you better. No matter what, wherever you are, whatever you want to do, we are here to help you out. Managed network services. So you saw the pic from or the video from Colonbon CIO. He said, yes, I want it. I really want it. But what happens after that? How to achieve it, what are the KPIs, what actually will be the outcome is something we bring our expertise. And it's not just about implementing, but what happens after that. Who is going to educate your employees? Who is going to manage your network? These are the things which needs to be kept in mind, just not the implementation phase, but the day 2 support, day 3 support as well. And we bring managed network services on the table as well. System integration, whatever type of model, vertical, horizontal, federated model you have, we integrate it with our systems. We have applications which can have different dashboards or different templates according to your requirements. So we bring all our expertise, and all of this is secured by our secured design in the mean of ZTNA, that means zero touch network access, or it could be SaaS model if you want to go for cloud-based applications coming to that. So this is what we bring to the table. Not only from the control, secure, or performance side, but also we make sure that we bring our expertise by our managed network and our system integration as well. So now if you have warehouses in different places, and if the AGV is moving from one warehouse to a different warehouse, how the handover from private network to public network happens on a 5G platform is going to be explained by my colleague Romain.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. So I'm Romain Durand. I'm head of research and innovation in Transatel. Transatel is a French company which has been acquired by NTT, so we are now part of the NTT family. So as you understood, the private network is really private. So you have private antenna, private core, private SIM card. It's really an independent network, like an island, very isolated. So it's okay in some use cases. You have your private SIM card that cannot work outside of the private network. It can be okay for some use cases. For example, in a nuclear power plants or in some factories, why not using only the private SIM card in the private networks? Now you also have many use cases, and we've come across many situations where the SIM card of the private network must be used outside of the private network. Typically, for the employees can use their devices in their private networks, but they are not living in the company. They're also traveling, are on the go, so they need to use a public network as well. Secondly, you have in the logistics, imagine some trucks coming from one factory to another factory. There's not a continuous of private network all around the way, so the need for public 5G networks. We spoke also earlier in some earlier workshop about the healthcare and the hospital using 5G services. You know the connected ambulance use case, where you collect all the data of the patient on the go, and the ambulance comes in the hospital, and in the hospital you may have some private network as well. So as soon as the ambulance enters in the hospital, the need to switch from public to private. So considering these needs of private-public hybrid model, we have designed a specific solution, a unique solution, allowing one single SIM card to be used in both private and public networks. The solution is very simple to set up. It does not require any interconnection between private and public networks that can be difficult to set up. And it does not require specific handset. Some implementation are requiring dual SIM handsets, which are costly and not always effective. So with the solution brought by NTT, it's really one single SIM card that can work in almost all handsets available. So we provide this SIM card, and we provide the public connectivity, and the customer don't need to go and ask for public connectivity to standard mobile operators. Why? Because we are relying on an existing solution that we have been offering for several years. It's our global public connectivity solution. What we have developed for many years is a global virtual network operator, which brings connectivity to more than 180 destinations in the world, and it's a global virtual network operator dedicated mainly to IoT. This service is used, for example, by some of our famous customers that are Airbus for the planes, or Fiat Chrysler Automotive for the automotive. These devices are used all over the world, and they need to be connected. They need to have public connectivity. And for example, a company such as Fiat Chrysler Automotive does not want to sign an agreement with a public operator in each of the 180 countries. So the idea is to bring them one single service, one single platform through a virtual network operator, and using this service for this large customer. And So we have this connectivity. We have the core network platform that manages this connectivity, and we have the full control on this core network. So this allows us to bring specific services, a lot of innovation. We have, for example, supported eSIM services for a long time now, and it has allowed us to manage this private-public offering, this extension of private network, as we are calling it. Taking over to you, Anush, to conclude.
Okay, so what does this mean for companies today? So as I explained, we help you to understand what digital transformation is, and not only understand, we help you to implement not only from the CIO level, but also from your employees level. So everyone, all the way from top hierarchy to the bottom hierarchy, everyone needs to undergo this digital transformation. And I also go ahead and call it the cultural transformation as well. Gone are the days where you used to make networks and then find use cases built on that network. Now it's the other way around. We have the use cases, and we need to find the network in order to cater to that use cases. From a reactive solution, we are moving to a proactive solution. From a mundane static network, we are moving to a more dynamic sliced network or something like that. So this is the digital transformation which we help to bring to the customers or to the enterprise, and this is our private 5G service. And when I mean by private, the enterprise has complete control, they have complete security, and more important, with the help of private 5G, you bring the best performance in class. Single integrated solution, since we don't help you in just POCs or implementation, but we also take care of day 1 and day 2 support as well. We bring our expertise for managed services. We have our global NOC across more than 180 countries, and all of this is bounded by our secured ZTNA and SaaS-based application approach. So what to do? The next steps for you, if you guys are interested, please don't hesitate to get in touch with us. You can get in touch with Michael, or you can get in touch with any of us, and we'll be more happy to understand, first of all, your use case, and we'll make sure that we'll bring private 5G in your location as soon as possible. So yeah, this is all what we had to present, and now we have a short session for a roundtable discussion. If you have any questions, we are more than happy to answer them. Thank you.
I think we can start with questions that are in the room before we go into some...
Yes, so, sir, did we answer the questions?
You did provide some elements that show how you would like to do it, so it's still maybe not yet that clear, especially if I look indeed, if you want to provide such a solution, of course, there are different actors who can build such a private network, and the customer, public customer. It depends also on the requirements of the corporate customers. You have now shown, let's say, the full-blown, so someone who says, I want it all, so from our perspective, and then yes, then you should install the equipment and data processing at the premises, behind the firewall, so this may be well for one particular type of customers. But of course you have maybe the advantage of having on top some services, you have an integration that you can offer, and now are you doing all this by your own, knowing that you would also need some spectrum, or do you think you could team up also with local CRCs, as they could also offer you some parts that you may be missing, or it would be easier for you to implement this?
Okay, maybe I take it first and then you go deeper into it. So this is really one of the reasons why we have been really looking forward to this event, and especially also the discussions with the ILR. So the discussions with the SMC specifically about private 5G started a couple of weeks ago, where we had the meeting with Eric and the guys and said, look, this is really what we are able to offer worldwide. Now, if you look at Luxembourg in the spectrum of Europe, So the whole thing started, private 5G network started in the US. CBRS was invented over there already when we started talking about LTE, private LTE at that moment. And simply the guys in the US came out with, like, we reserve as part of the spectrum for enterprise use cases, and which is not auctioned in a sense then to telco operators. Now that's also not entirely true, because that specific spectrum has 3 different layers or levels or priorities. And the first one is always granted to the operators, the local operators in that sense. Now that's in the US. Now in the US, this is already since a long time day-to-day life. You can go into a portal and you can say, I would like for my stadium to get some spectrum. You press enter and you get the spectrum. Of course, there's somebody behind who is facilitating the case and making sure that everything is okay. But this is basically where it comes from. Now, if we are looking about Europe, private 5G is still a new concept in that sense. By most, the farthest are the Germans. So we have 22 pilots in Germany on private 5G. So it means also that they have spectrum, which manually is requested, but they have spectrum reserved, which is not like auction, but is specifically reserved for enterprise use cases. We have the Netherlands. We have, and in Germany, for instance, we have Köln-Bonn Airport, what we already mentioned, but we also have BMW, which we are doing in Germany. You have the Netherlands, you have in France in the meantime even.
Italy as well.
You have Italy as well. So most of Europe has enterprise spectrum reserved. Our first discussions with the SMC saying, okay, look, this is what we would need or what we expect is, like I said already some weeks ago, and we are looking forward to see how we can solve that issue in Luxembourg. Now, having said that, I know where you're looking at, and we had already discussions with Cleveland, with Didier today, so there might be other ways to find like a solution to this. Like I said, I'm coming from post-group, and one of the things which are for me obvious, Luxembourg is a small place. You have to know the different actors, you have to bring the different actors together, and we all have to benefit from it. It makes no sense, like in a big country, that we are like fighting around on the different use cases, because a lot of them are public. And I mean, there's always a way in Luxembourg, if we want to go fast, that we find solutions which are in the interest of more than one party at that moment. I hope, I mean, it's not a real answer, but I hope it shows at least a little bit the idea. Now, Anush mentioned something else, which is also true. So we have the commitment from our CEO globally to say, okay, if there is no spectrum, we will be able to buy it. First of all, we need a use case for it. And the second thing is, it's not something that we would expect in the heart of Europe, because all the surrounding countries found a solution for enterprise-grade private 5G. So I think we will also find a solution in Luxembourg for it, and not like considering us in the same level as South Africa or something like this.
Well, of course, from your perspective, I understand what you are saying and why you are saying this. I just would like to highlight, as you mentioned, Luxembourg is quite small. You have, let's say, quite some challenges, and also from authorizations and EMF and everything. So maybe you also need to look at who is best at doing what, and is there something to be won together.
Absolutely.
That's just a reflection I would like to give back, having heard what you have said.
Yeah. Again, I'm fully committed to sit together on the table and try to find the best solution for all the different stakeholders. It's not something that one party is winning something if we are going there against each other. I mean, there are different reasons why we would need lower spectrum. For the moment, as far as I know from the SMC, is we have 26 gigahertz currently reserved for test cases that would be available. Now, just think about rolling out private 5G in a hospital. I mean, there's a healthcare aspect to this. So the entire world is concerned about health of people and so on, and that's also how it should be. Now, if you roll out 5G in a hospital, even people who have no idea what 5G is will reflect on, oh, we don't need this and we don't want this. So that's the first reaction of most of the people. Now, they accept that Wi-Fi is already rolled out for a long time. Guess what? Regarding to CBRS, what our Belgium and German and other neighbors are doing. We are using more or less the same spectrum as Wi-Fi there. So we are 3.6 kilohertz, something like that. So this is basically why we should find a way to provide what all the other surrounding countries in Europe are doing. So there are more than one angle to that picture. So 26 gigahertz is certainly not an answer to every solution.
Yes.
Well, I would like to make a comment about this factor solution. I'm working as ILR, but not in the frequency management department. So I'm from the ILR, but I'm not working in the frequency management department. So I'm more on the telecom services and network side. And here you have also the possibility to have to set up an MVNO instead of acquiring frequencies, which might be in your case, which is in your case quite good, because you come from an application point of view and not from a telecommunication network provider point of view. And this might be a solution also for this small Luxembourgish country. And with Transatel, I think you have a lot of knowledge already in your house.
Mm-hmm. Yes. I mean, black and white to respond to that question. In general, it's always interesting for us to set up collaborations and go for like an MVNO solution. I mean, that's what we have with the Transatel platform. But we're talking about public 5G here. And it will also be in Luxembourg like that. If we're talking about private 5G, I have to explain a little bit how the offering is working. So NTT is a quite big family. So we have NTT Ltd, that's the tier 1 network operator, the managed service provider, the one with the data center, so that company. We are part of a family called NTT Inc. So we have NTT Data that you certainly might know, but we also have companies which are specifically focusing on R&D. We have an R&D budget of 3.6 billion euros per year, which is not that small. We also managed to get some of that money here to Luxembourg because like we are an innovation hub here. That's what you have seen in the healthcare cases, for instance, in that sense. So one of the companies called NTT Investment Capital was investing into a company in the valley, which is called Celona. And Celona is a company who considers themselves today as the leading company in private 5G. So we own a part of their stake. I don't want to make it public, but it is clearly our solution for rolling out private 5G globally worldwide. So we have that platform, we have the small cells, we have the full equipment to roll out private 5G in any country. The only thing that we need is spectrum. So just to make it clear, so yes, collaboration is nice, but it's not like we will find another way here in Luxembourg and like ignoring the corporate offering and the platform that we have.
Wi-Fi 6 or 5G? Which one to use as an enterprise?
I've done so many trainings, and this is the first question which pops up. Why do we need Wi-Fi? Why do we need 5G if we already have Wi-Fi? I believe Wi-Fi. It's not going anywhere. I feel that the best way to approach Wi-Fi versus 5G is to not have versus, but it's Wi-Fi with 5G. So if you have Wi-Fi in indoor network, I think Wi-Fi 6 especially, the performance is at similar grade with what 5G has to offer. But I think the control and the security part is what is missing with Wi-Fi. Wi-Fi does not have spectrum as well. It's all unlicensed. So it's like a mutual collaboration where we can use Wi-Fi for buildings or for small houses. But if we are moving outdoors where we want to have coverage, that is where 5G will come into picture. So I don't feel that it's a right approach, that it's not Wi-Fi versus 5G, but it's more about Wi-Fi along with 5G will provide the best solution possible. Right now, they are complementary. Maybe in future, there will be provision where we'll be replacing it, but Wi-Fi is not going anywhere because of the flexibility options as well and easier to implement as well. So I would say Wi-Fi complementing 5G or 5G complementing Wi-Fi and not Wi-Fi versus 5G.
As we had in the previous session around healthcare, I mean, there is like, if you are having use cases on internet of medical things, so if you have the new things that are coming into the hospital themselves, Wi-Fi will not be an option at all. I mean, Wi-Fi is there to stay because we have a lot of old equipment in hospitals that has to be integrated, but there is no way that we can launch new services in a hospital without a carrier-grade service. And there is a reason on resilience and there's a reason on security, because like there's no exchange of passwords or stuff like this. There is no connectivity issue towards the network of milliseconds, like was explained before from so we will certainly have like a mix of Wi-Fi and 5G, but all the new use cases are leveraging the 5G network.
And I think with the IoT as well, which we've seen also in manufacturing and healthcare, just imagine that a lot of thousands of sensors or devices require a lot of connectivity, and for sure that the 5G is actually will provide that kind of a fast connectivity, and you know that it's going to be the best solution for
I think from security perspective, we are now authenticating users and not devices. So irrespective of whatever devices you use, whether it's your phone, your watches, your laptop, your iPads, if you provide the right key in one instance, your certificates will carry forward to multiple devices, and we are not doing per device authentication, whereas Wi-Fi is a bit legacy, so we need to have authentication at every step, but private 5G, we are authenticating users and not devices. So this is where kind of we are moving towards more, first of all, recognizing the users and not the devices, and then slowly kind of making a secured VPN gateway wherever you go, whatever you do at whatever devices you are using. So this is where we are moving.
Try to find one single hospital who is happy with the Wi-Fi rollout. And it's in the design. It has nothing to do with it is badly done, because when you start doing the design of it, Wi-Fi can be interfered. So if you are having your hotspot in your pocket while rolling out your iPhone in the hospital or whatever, there is something that you can do nothing about that. In a carrier-grade network like 5G, there is no interference. That spectrum is dedicated for your use case, and you can slice it even to different use cases inside one hospital. So it's huge difference. It's huge.
Do we have?
Question for Romain.
Oh, yes.
Yes. You say you're a virtual network operator. Can you explain this more in detail? And another question about the SIM card. You mentioned that you can use it for private and public.
Yes.
How come?
So, first, the virtual network operator. It's a concept of, it's like a mobile network operator actually not having any antennas. So the mobile virtual network operator owns the core network. It's a bit like when you are using your SIM card abroad, the service works, but your home operator is not abroad. It's the same. The virtual network operator has a full control of the service and is renting the antenna of the public network operator. So that's for the virtual network operator. And it has been, it's well known in the B2C market, where you can, you have in different countries, you have some offer from, for example, Virgin Mobile or other players that are providing service to end user. So virtual network operator is like a mobile network operator. Then regarding the famous SIM that can work both on private and public, there are actually different ways to implement that. Some have their advantage and drawbacks, but what we have implemented is really a SIM-based service where you don't need to interconnect between networks, because from a telecom perspective, you may say, between public and private, well, we could do some kind of roaming, a bit like when you're going abroad, actually. You could roam into the private network. So roaming is a possibility, but it has its drawback. You need to have interconnection, you need to have agreement, you need to exchange a lot of things. That's called the roaming interconnection. It may be adequate in some situations, but in most of the cases, it could be difficult, especially if you envision a multiplicity of private network. We can think of about thousands or tens of thousands of private network. Establish roaming agreement with 10,000 of network would be a nightmare for public network operators.
Okay, maybe last question. Michael, you spoke about healthcare use cases. Where do you see this going in the next 5 years?
That was a question that was asked also previously. So in NTT Labs, we are currently working on digital twins for 5 minutes. In our NTT Labs, we are working currently on digital twins for actually cardiovascular systems. And so we will have the possibility, like we have it today, with an engine in doing a flight, to have a replica of that and do some live testing on it. So that will happen also in the surgery room or in prevention from human beings like you and me in the next couple of years. Like I said, cardiovascular system will be the first one. We will have other organs in the time frame of the next 10 years or whatever that will be developed there, and a digital twin version. And of course, if you want to talk to those models, you probably will have glasses. These glasses or whatever will give you all the insights into everything that you need to know while you're performing your surgery in the hospital. So this is basically where the whole thing is going, and this like Internet of health things in that sense is something which has a clear demand for a mobile connectivity underneath, and that connectivity has to be absolutely resilient and it has to be absolutely secure. So having like your SIM or eSIM as your certificate, like it was presented by Anush, and not like having to interfere passwords or stuff like that. So 5G is clearly an enabler for digital transformation, not only in healthcare, in all the different sectors. Railway is certainly one of them. But if you're talking about healthcare, this is actually where we see it going. And so why is healthcare so important for us? That's maybe also another important question, because, I mean, NTT is, the roots of NTT is actually that we are in company in Japan. So you can call us the Japanese Post in that sense. And of course, from there, we became like telecom or whatever global operator in that sense. But in the mentality of the people in Japan, there is still like this mentality to use technology for good and build technology for good. And that's why we invest a huge amount in it. And from 5 different areas, healthcare is really one of the key areas where we invest in. And that's also why these innovations in healthcare become so important for us. Just answering more or less.
Maybe just last about the frequencies. This is an interesting question. What are the most...
So I see frequencies in 3 bands. The lower frequency band is around 700 megahertz. Like if you want to have, like you don't use the same frequency for all the use cases. So if you have rural-based applications, or if you want to have more coverage, then the low band of 700 megahertz is going to be utilized. If you have an urban requirement, or if you want to have covered cities or smart cities, then I believe 3.6 to 3.75 gigahertz is going to be utilized, which is kind of mid-band level. And if you have densely populated, like hotspots, or you have malls, or you have stadiums where data, like huge chunks of data, is to be exchanged, this is where the high tier frequency or 26 gigahertz frequency is going to be utilized. So there is no one frequency band utilized across the use cases, but we'll figure out the frequency as we understand the use cases, because both all the 3, low, medium, and high band, have their pros and cons regarding to coverage, regarding to data, flexibility, and everything. So these are the main 3 bands which I see used in different use cases.
Now, I got a little bit, if I listen to myself, I got a little bit the impression that we are the enemy here, which we are not. We are since 30 years almost in Luxembourg. So we are ziemlich letztburg. Also das nicht. What is also important is that we are quite proud about Luxembourg in the European region of NTT, because a lot of stuff that gets developed here, like I mentioned before, the case for the government of the Isle of Man and so on, this is like making us quite famous and making also the country famous. So this is really something where we are also beloved by parts of the government, the SMC and so on. I think we have a good relationship and we are very well established in Luxembourg.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Great. Thanks.